Hello. Let's start with something recorded purely for your listening pleasure. Mark Gatiss, actor, writer, comedian, has been a super fan of Anthony Hopkins for as long as he can remember. Last year, he had the chance to act alongside his hero in The Father. Hopkins plays a well-to-do pensioner disappearing into dementia, and Gatiss is his son-in-law. The scenes they share are intense, as is Mark's endless admiration for Hopkins. I wanted to know all about it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
But I want an honest answer, nothing fancy. Can you do that for me?
Yeah.
Well then, how much longer do you intend to hang around getting on everybody's tits?
Oh, me?
Yes, you. I'd like to know your opinion. I mean, do you intend to go on ruining your daughter's life, or is it too much to hope you might behave reasonably in the foreseeable future?
What you talking about, Ed?
About you, Anthony.
Huh?
About you.
Can you remember the first time you saw Anthony Hopkins on screen?
I do, yes. It was probably when 8 Bells Toll. My late father used to take us to the pictures all the time. And I suppose some of my favourite things remain dad movies.
Right.
He was very big on Alistair MacLean, especially Where Eagles Dare, which remained his favourite film all his life. And I loved that film. When we were making The Father, he gradually realised that I'd seen everything he'd ever done. You haven't seen that one, have you? And
Was he embarrassed about some of them?
I don't know. I think he's forgotten a lot of them. But we were talking about magic, and then my great friend Reece Shearsmith from The League of Gentlemen, it's his favourite film. And it was Reece's birthday. I said, would you mind doing a message? He said, I'll do the song. So he did the whole routine as Fats, you know. Hey, schmucko. Sweet mystery of life at last I'll tell. Did the whole thing.
And you recorded
Yeah.
this?
I don't think Reece has ever been more excited in his life.
Oh, fantastic.
As a fan, you just saw these fantastic performances every now and then, intermittently. Yeah. And then I would say, to me, the Elephant Man is the kind of the moment where you sort of slightly sit back and think, this is something else.
Yeah.
And
Is there a moment in that film particularly?
well, I mean, you know, famously Freddie Francis, who shot it, called David Lynch Lucky Lynch, because that shot where he first sees John Merrick and the tear rolls down his face with absolutely perfect timing. He thought, God, it feels like magic, doesn't it, that time? You believe in it entirely. The way you believe in the entire film as being what Victorian London actually looked like. It's a magnificent piece of work. What can you say? It's heart-rendingly moving, totally convincing. And Frederick Treves you believe in him completely as a good man, you know. And he says to Hannah Gordon, who's also wonderful in it, "Am I a good man?" You know. And Merrick says, "Can you cure me?" Just no, we can't cure you. Make you comfortable, can't cure you. And he throws so much of it away, you know.
And people can't see this, but you're actually doing something with your hands there that's very Hopkins, because his use of his hands is always very interesting.
But seeing him work up close, it was a slightly out of the body experience, because I know I sound like a stalker. I am. I know his face so well, and seeing certain things flitting across it, certain emotions and sorts of techniques and styles, it was quite extraordinary to sort of see it up close, you know.
Let's put The Father to one side for now, because I'm going to be grilling you on that in a second. But just to look at some of his most famous performances, his Lecter. In your heart, you care about him as Hannibal Lecter. You know,
Yeah.
you feel it. There is something weirdly warm and likeable about him. And the thing, when I went back and rewatched that the other day, the part is infinitely smaller than you remember it. He's somewhere between Harry Lime and the shark in Jaws.
It's about like 16 minutes.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And he's comic, Hannibal Lecter, and Hopkins gets that. The way he sits, the squat power, the grace, that entire franchise, which to a certain extent continues to this day, was made out of Hopkins elegance. You know, many have tried and many have failed to make the elegant murderer. And this is the ne plus ultra.
That's exactly the word. There's an amazing elegance. But to me, the key to it is how much fun he's having. He said to me when that script turned up, he thought, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I'm going to grab this. There's bits of Rod Steiger in there. He bumped into Rod Steiger and said, you got that whole performance from me. And all these things. And, but he's having a ball, and you can see it. And he's leafing through the pages, and he just winks and all that stuff. I mean, absolutely having a ball. And he realised something was going on, as we all did, as you say. And there was this sense that his moment had come.
Yeah.
You know, and for 16 minutes of screen time, or whatever it is, it's a game changer.
It is. And, you know, you mentioned earlier that, you know, because we're on the film programme, because we're just talking about his film career, and so there's seemingly the sort of lost magician, and of course he was just doing other things. But certainly in terms of sort of moviegoers, the effect of his not being there all the time is that we never, at this point, 1990, 1991, we were not bored of Anthony Hopkins. So we come to him afresh almost in Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, absolutely. There's the slight king over the water quality to it, isn't there? That you go a bit like John Neville in Baron Munchausen. It's like, where have you been?
Yes.
That's a joyous feeling for the audience, I think. But also what we've had in the intervening years with between stage roles are things like 84 Charing Cross Road. I'm sure you have these. I watch it whenever it's on.
Yes.
I once watched it on DVD, and then it was on the TV, and I watched it about 2 days later. Just watched it again, because it's beautiful. And what I've always loved about Anthony Hopkins is he has this, of course, this extraordinary volcanic Welsh rage bubbling under everything. But the minuteness of some of his performances, particularly in Remains of the Day and 84 Charing Cross Road, it's magnificent. Maybe because you know that underneath it is this sort of wellspring of power, that the tininess of it, it's a latent threat and a latent power to smash,
Yes.
which is covered by this gentlemanly veneer, which you feel might just be quite fragile.
What about Shadowlands? I got a text from my younger sister the other day who had never seen it before and had watched it, caught it on the television, and just said, she said, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. I don't think I'm going to be able to function or do anything. I'm so heartbroken. I'm devastated. I haven't felt like this in front of a movie for years. What do I do?
I think he had this amazing post-Lambs purple patch, Remains of the Day, Howard's End, Shadowlands. What a run. And they're all beautiful. I mean, that is, you know, my favourite bit in Shadowlands is when they go and stay in that hotel, and he has no social skills.
He's on the phone.
Yes, and he just doesn't order. He just hangs up and says, "I panicked."
Yes, yes.
It's beautiful.
Oh, it's wonderful. The way he holds his hands when he's having these slightly awkward conversations with Deborah Winger up until the point at which he does declare himself. Again, this covert thing, this subdued thing, the strength is withheld. It's so compressed, it's sprung back, it's waiting to come out. And so watching him, your heart is in your mouth.
Yeah. To me, the apex of that is Stevens in Remains of the Day, because there are so many passages of that when Emma Thompson comes to his room and he's reading that romance. So this is my private time, Miss Kenton, you know, and it's breathtaking. But equally, there's a bit where he just goes down to get a bottle of wine from the cellar and drops it, and he goes down, and suddenly it explodes. It's all there again. It's just like there's something beating under there. He's always very self-deprecating about, it's just, you know, I just stuck a moustache on, he says, or it's just easy to play repressed. It's not easy. And what he does is make it look effortless, you know.
He's just brilliant at playing, you know, men with sort of wasted lives in some way. And that film is it's an impeccable film, Remains of the Day. It could not be bettered. And again, that whole movie, it's an accumulation of memorable gestures and motions. That's all it is. Both of them, both Hopkins and Thompson.
There's a remarkable scene when Hugh Grant comes and pretends that his car's broken down, and he's actually there to find out what's going on with James Fox, Lord Darlington, and about these appeasers. And he makes him sit down. Sit down. He can't sit down because he's a servant. He sits down and he says, "You must know what's going on in this house." And Hopkins just rubs his eye. So, and there's such weariness in it. that'll be all certain, and then off he goes. And again, it's a world contained in a tiny gesture.
What about the moment when with Tim Pigott-Smith, and he says, "I'd be lost without her," and it's the one moment where he gives himself away and he realises he's done it, and the look on his face when he realises that.
He betrayed himself.
He's betrayed himself.
Yeah.
So tell me, the father, had you met him before being cast in that?
Well, cards on the table. I met him on the set of Hannibal. This is a long story. I'll keep it short. One of my oldest friends, Julia Dolkin, is obsessed with him, has been since she was a child. And I promised her at some point, because another friend of mine was doing the effects supervision on Hannibal, that we would meet him. And I cleared it was all going to happen. It was like a big secret plot. It was all sorts of happening. I remember we checked in this hotel and we were sitting in the bar, and Ray Liotta and Tony Hopkins both came down. It was an extraordinary... This is years ago, obviously. It's about 2000. And the next day was the day we were hoping to have the set visit. But my friend Emma texted me and said, "Oh, it's very tense today. They're taking the top of Ray Liotta's head off." And I thought, oh, God, this is all going to go wrong. It's all going to go wrong. I know it. It's going to be one of those awkward things. And anyway, we went to an art gallery in the morning, and we just drifted back towards the house where they were filming for the afternoon. The security guard said they're all having lunch. And then we started talking to Tony Hopkins' stunt double. And then, this is no joke, the first assistant suddenly walked up to me and said, "What are you doing here?" And it turned out to be a huge fan, ridiculous. He said, "Hang on." He went away, came back 2 minutes later, dragging Anthony Hopkins by the hand and said, "Tony, you're not going to believe who this is." I said, "No, this is the way it's supposed to go." So, I mean, this is years ago. I don't even know if I ever reminded him of it, but that's when I first met him. But Florian Zeller, the writer and director of The Father, took me out to breakfast. And I'd seen the play with great Kenneth Cranham and loved it. And it was, the way you want it to go again. He said, "I'd love you to do my movie." I went, "Yes, please." and I knew it was going to be Anthony Hopkins, so it was a moment. And then all I can say is the whole experience was a delight. But the thing I'll take to my grave was the scene when he first comes in and finds me, and he says, "Well, what are you doing in my flat?" And I'm going, "It's my flat." Anthony, you live with us. Mm. And he goes on this sort of little journey, sort of explaining things to himself. He says, "My daughter, she's not very bright, you see. She gets that from her mother. She's not very bright. But I tell you one thing. I'm not leaving my flat." And the whole room shook. It was amazing. I mean, we just sat there. And then Florian just said, "Cut." And it was what, it was titanic. But it came from this tiny little discursive, sort of slightly smirking anecdote kind of thing about his daughter. And then he just built, I couldn't really see how he built up to it, but it was just absolutely amazing.
How did you feel when you got home at the end of each day filming with him?
Well, I was only sad it wasn't longer. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, it was just... And I mean, everybody says, "What's it like? What's it like?" And I was going, it was better than I could ever have hoped for, because we just, it was just lovely to get on with them. I mean, I would really say, tell me that story, because I know that story. Tell me it back. You do it, And there's that wonderful story about his dad. Oddly, we're talking a lot about dads. And he's still very, as it were, in touch with his father's memory. And my own dad had dementia. He's now passed away. It was really similar. I mean, incredibly similar to the plot. He thought he was living in another house that was identical to his own house. And
your father?
Yes, my father. So strange. There's this famous story about he was doing The Country Wife in the West End, and his parents were coming to see it. And Olivier came the same night. And to his horror, in the dressing room afterwards, Olivier was stuck in a corner with his dad talking about football, or his dad was talking about football, and Tony was in the corner just sweating with his mother going, "Oh, what's he doing? What's he saying?" Eventually Olivier left, and he said to his dad, "Dad, that was Lord Olivier." And his dad said, "Well, he breathes oxygen, doesn't he?" And I knew that story, so I just made him say it back to me. That's at the heart of it, I think, is he just doesn't have any airs and graces. He really kicks that in the teeth when he sees it, because he hates it. He wants people to be natural and normal, and you can be in this major thing with multiple Oscar winners, but you should be doing it properly and having a good time. That's all it comes down to, I think.
And did you keep in touch with him?
He emails me all the time. I'm thrilled. Yeah. Yes, amazingly, yes. I'd love to write something for him. We did talk about something about his uncle Eric. He really wants to play a spiv. We talked a lot about Roger Livesey, who's one of my favourite actors, and Nigel Patrick. Anyone who's actually in The League of Gentlemen, the movie, the Brian Forbes movie, sort of slightly disreputable post-World War II chancers. And his uncle Eric was like that. He told me he had a little sort of spivvy moustache and dyed black hair. He'd go to the bar and then pat his pockets and say, "Do you know, I find myself temporarily embarrassed." And I could see every time he did it, I thought he really wants to do this, whatever it is, It's such a lovely idea. And I suppose it's something we haven't seen him do before.
Anthony Hopkins as a spiv with dialogue written by Mark Gatiss. It has to happen. And you can see him alongside his hero in The Father on DVD, Blu-ray and online.